So now there's doubt in Kamala. Now, to be fair here, the Democrats recently had a great haul of cash. Enough suckers, I mean voters and supporters, I mean suckers, gave $50 million to the Democrats right now because Kamala is the nominee. Now, as it stands right now, there's been recent breaking reports that Kamala Harris wins enough support to clinch the Democratic nomination. But on the other hand, even Joe Biden is privately doubting if Harris can actually beat Trump. And there are certain groups and union groups that are not endorsing her. Plus, now, folks, one has to wonder, what's the whole purpose of even a primary if this is just how a nominee is going to be selected? Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, RFK Jr., Fat Tony. You wasted your time. You should be raging at the screen right now. But I want to pull up this article here first of Joe Biden doubting Kamala Harris can actually beat Trump. So U.S. President Joe Biden was reluctant to abandon his re-election campaign, partly due to concerns that Vice President Kamala Harris isn't capable of taking on the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, Axios reported on Monday, citing sources. Biden announced on Sunday that he wouldn't seek re-election and would focus solely on fulfilling his duties as president for the remainder of his term. Shortly after announcing his withdrawal, Biden endorsed Harris as the Democratic Party nominee for the upcoming elections. Trump reacted immediately to the news, suggesting that defeating Harris will be easier than Biden. According to the Axios report, which cited 3 Biden aides familiar with recent talks about his plans, the president's private anxieties reflect broader questions among some Democratic leaders about Harris as their nominee this November. The report pointed out that Harris' time as vice president has been occasionally rocky, defined by a large staff turnover, her reluctance to deal with political risky responsibilities, among other things. The picture that's being painted here is that Kamala was hemorrhaging staff members, which means she's probably very difficult to work with, or either that, this might be mind-numbingly dumb. And 2, when given responsibility, the second in command, the vice president, just shrugs her shoulders and is like, whatever, who cares? Not a problem. Much of Harris' staff has left over the past 3.5 years, the article said, citing disclosures which showed that of the 47 Harris staffers listed in 2021, only 5 still worked for her as of this spring. So, let's do some basic mathematics. 47 minus 5. So that means 42 people. 42 people that worked with her left. Now, what does that say about that 42? Maybe they can't keep up with her fast-paced work, or maybe they can't stand someone who doesn't know what they're doing. I'll let you decide. No such thing as a wrong answer. For all we know, Kamala Harris is an all-star performer, and we just can't see it. Former Harris aides told Axios that the high turnover was partly because of how the VP treated her staff. Oh, Kamala, be better. The aides cited high standards that some did not want to keep up with, while others said they felt that she frequently grilled them the way she grilled Trump officials. They referred to it as Harris prosecuting the staff because, Harris likes to prosecute people. According to the report, the relationship between the vice president's office and the West Wing has often been tense. White House aides said they sometimes felt like Harris wasn't a team player and stayed away from any tasks that involved risks. She has reportedly been cautious and reluctant to participate in events that weren't tightly controlled because she wanted things to work right for her. At times, Harris aides suspected that Biden's team didn't want to give Harris opportunities to shine to prevent her from being seen as a viable alternative to Biden ahead of his re-election bid, Axios wrote. Many Democrats, including President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, have followed Biden's lead in endorsing Harris in the hours after the announcement. Others, however, including former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, House Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Chucky Boy Schumer, and former President Barack Obama, have refrained from backing her so far. And I want to pull up this article here because Kamala Harris wins enough support to clinch a Democratic nomination. So great, she did it. She crossed that Rubicon. She's got enough support for the Democratic nomination, which is fine. But the question is, what is the electoral process now?
I thought it was really interesting when she said voters are telling her, I've lost faith faith in the electoral process is one of the challenges for Kamala Harris to make up for what Republicans have so successfully messaged, that there's something wrong with the system and your vote counting.
Democrats have done this too, Bernie Sanders supporters, and have said the same thing.
I mean, like, if we really want to talk about sort of the train here, I mean, Shirley Chisholm ran on this issue of getting voters to trust institutions again.
Do you trust these institutions? A type 1 for yes, Kit. I love it when my corporate overlords give me orders to follow. Type 2, man, no, I'm never going to trust these institutions. They cost me money and they screw me up the wazoo. I wonder how many 2s will get in the chat. I wonder.
And there's a generational divide. As a Gen Xer, you know, I watched Jesse Jackson on TV in 84 and 88. Ron Brown became the DNC chair, and that was really exciting to me. It made sense that if I didn't like the institutions or I didn't think they were fair, all we needed to do was change the leadership. The younger voters don't feel.
No, you can't change the leadership. In order to bring in change, said institution needs to go.
That way anymore. In many respects, younger voters feel like the institutions themselves are so flawed, it doesn't matter who's at the top. And I think that's the biggest hurdle that Democrats and Republicans, but certainly in this moment, Kamala Harris is going to have to try to communicate that the institutions matter. And I do think we're starting to see that, obviously, with the decisions in the Supreme Court. But more to the point, she has got to relay and convey this trust in the institutions and in the process. And maybe her candidacy, just the fact that she's running, helps that happen.
But that's not how things work. Because now that Kamala is the nominee, or at least that she's got enough support, there are going to be challenges towards it. Now, what do I mean by these challenges? So all of you know, the DNC convention will be here in Chicago, August 19th through the 22nd. We here at Heartland's Media will be covering it. But things are not as they're being perceived right now. And that is, there could be a contested convention. And there are some Democrats that don't want Kamala to be the nominee, because Kamala, when you compare her numbers from 2019, 2020 to where she is now, she hasn't changed at all. In fact, she hasn't made any movements whatsoever. Her campaign went belly up in the early stages of the Democratic primary of 2020. And by the way, there are many people that are vying for her seat. Especially, case in point, a person named Joe Manchin. You might have heard of him.
Now, whether there is some kind of a town meeting with Joe Manchin or another possible rival remains to be seen. Marianne Williamson's not going to cut it, so she's not going to get into a town.
Marianne. How much time did you waste again running?
She wants to. But if Joe Manchin wants to run, and he certainly has the ego for it, it could be that Kamala Harris has to make a joint appearance. It won't really be a debate, but some kind of joint appearance with Joe Manchin. I think that would be possibly a very good thing for Kamala Harris. She said yesterday that she needs to earn this nomination. She's very conscious of the fact that she doesn't want to be seen as having been handed it on a silver platter.
So does she want somebody to?
I think she does. I mean, that's how I read her statement.
And she's getting it. But the thing is, everything's being handed to her. Now, I'm going to play a video. It's only 9 seconds long of Jesse Waters more or less summing everything up about Kamala.
She didn't earn this. She inherited it. And Americans aren't hot on heirs. They like self-made men and women.
Well, Jesse, on the one hand, you could be right. But on the other hand, too, Americans keep voting for these narcissistic bastards. Because that's what we have. Because for a long time, corporate media has successfully brainwashed us into thinking that this is A-okay. But she's not getting everything. Case in point right here.
The United Auto Workers reacting to President Biden dropping out of the election, but they did not endorse Vice President Kamala Harris. They write this: today, the United Auto Workers thanks President Joe Biden for his incredible term of service. The path forward is clear. We will defeat Donald Trump.
Now, I do find this whole idea of self-made people running our country. We've never had real self-made people run our country, okay? A lot of these people, a lot of these rich politicians, they've inherited their wealth. They got it from their great-grandma and great-grandpa, or they got it from their grandpa or grandma or their mama and papa or some rich uncle. That's the truth of it. A lot of these people who are quote unquote rich and influential got their money from a relative or family member, you know. Yes, maybe early on said family could have been self-made. We're not going to deny that. But the whole idea that we elect self-made people, no. A lot of these politicians wormed their way up on top. They had to bend over backwards and open their wazoo so that they could play in said system. They're not self-made people. They're parasitic, all of them. Democratic politicians, Republican politicians.
This billionaire agenda and elect a champion for the working class. The statement mentioned Harris picketing with the group in 2019, but still did not endorse any candidate. The group is an important voting bloc for the election with nearly 400,000 members nationwide. The UAW Executive Board's next steps will be voting for who to endorse. We're not sure when that's going to happen. At former President Trump and J.D. Vance's Michigan rally on Saturday, Trump spoke about bringing the auto industry back home and even recognized the union member. Watch this.
Yep. So that's what she has to face off against. But we have to look who Kamala is, and we have to look at her background because this will play a key role. I want to give a huge shout out to good friend of the show, Nico House. I was recently on his platform. I think a lot of people have forgotten who Kamala is.
Joe Biden finally drops from the presidential race. Turns out all those conspiracy theorists were right, which means the Democrats rigged the primaries for Biden to win so that RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson couldn't win, and Biden ends up dropping out anyway. And to add insult to injury, he endorses Kamala Harris for the Democratic ticket. And for a plethora of reasons, this is a problem. But let's start with the fact that me and Kamala got the exact same amount of votes during the Democratic primary process, which is 0. It should also be insulting to Democrats that Biden would pick a candidate who was forced to drop out of the race before a single vote was cast in 2020 because Tulsi Gabbard handed her ass on the debate stage and she only had 1% of the black vote by the end of the week. So despite voters making it clear we don't want her, they decided we're going to get her anyway. But thank God the Democrats are here to protect us from Trump because it's actually he who is a threat to democracy, not the party who just selected a candidate who was rejected by the party and forced her onto us. Not the party who argued in court during the DNC fraud lawsuit that they can pick whatever candidate they want and the voters have no say, and then goes on to prove that fact by having the president endorse Kamala, who has 0 votes during this primary.
Now, I just want to pause here for one quick minute. First of all, I have run to so many Democrats and liberals that are super excited that Kamala is now the new leader or nominee. Again, anything could happen at the convention in August. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. But the fact that there are people celebrating in the streets or overjoyed on social media really says a lot about their ability to think critically of the situation. Right before our very eyes, we see the Democratic Party just step together, at least for the moment, be unified, at least for the moment, and select Kamala as their nominee. No voting was needed. No primary was needed. No debate stage was needed. The party just said, okay, it's Kamala, at least for the time being. So once again, 2016, 2020, and now 2024, tic-tac-toe, 3 in a row, the Democrats rigged the primary again. They do it. Right before us. No shame, no nothing. What's beneficial about this, and this was brought up on yesterday's live stream from one of our audience members, this time the Democrats can't blame progressives. Trust me on it, they will, because this is their choice. They're going to pick Kamala Harris, somebody whose polling was absolutely abysmal. Biden was and is more popular than Kamala. And the thing is, as more and more people look into Kamala's background, they're going to realize that she is a horribly flawed individual who should not have that nomination. Hell, Democrats, if you wanted to have Kamala as a nominee, what you should have done in 2023 was have Biden say he wasn't going to seek re-election and have an open primary. Then you could have thrown in Kamala. Then you could have had primary debates. And then you could have at least put on a show at least, show an attempt of, oh, we're going through with a democratic process, even though there isn't one, because the Democratic Party is a private corporation, and behind closed doors, said party leadership picks who they want as their nominee. If you're a voter, you're just participating. You have no significance whatsoever because it's the donors that decide who's going to be the nominee. Continuing on.
What makes this even more insulting is that the Democrats seem to believe that y'all have short-term memory and that we don't remember why we didn't vote for Kamala to begin with. But that's okay. That's why y'all got me. So we're going to talk about it. How about the fact that Kamala is part of an administration that has helped facilitate genocide in Gaza? And there is something, or rather 5 million somethings, that tells me she won't change this stance when she becomes president. Or how about the fact that whether she was DA of San Francisco or Attorney General of California, Kamala always seemed to find herself on the wrong side of history. Daniel Larson, an innocent man, was kept in jail 2 more years after a judge ordered his release because Kamala said he didn't file his petition on time. Or that time Kamala worked with SFPD to convict Jamal Trulove of a murder he didn't commit by falsifying evidence. In addition to falsifying evidence, they paid off a witness and her family $60,000 to lie and say that she had a clear vision of Trulove committing the murder. Or how about the time Kamala entered a race for DA against Terrence Hallinan, even though they were both Democrats, and he was considered at the time to be very progressive. And the reason why is because Hallinan was investigating priests who molested a bunch of kids in San Francisco, and Kamala buried the investigation.
And that's not the first time she's done that, especially when it comes time for corruption. After all, Kamala, this might surprise you, her wonderful administration actually got a good little campaign boost from somebody associated with the Trump administration a long time ago. That's right, folks. It's one big club.
I mean, she kept men in jail past their sentences so that she could make sure that California continued to have cheap labor. And I know everybody gets mad when they hear that she put away 1,500 men for marijuana-related charges, but they're wrong because she actually almost put away 2,000 men for marijuana-related charges in a state where marijuana is legal. And she laughed at putting kids' parents in jails for their kids being truant, knowing that this was disproportionately affecting the poor community because they didn't have people to watch their sick kids, so the oldest would have to stay home.
So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco.
Ah, yes, the infamous cackle. The cackle of the Joker. I'm going to put families behind bars. That's right. If the kids miss a single day of school, mama and papa, or either that if it's a single household, could go to jail. Isn't that great? Causing more instability in neighborhoods. These politicians are not smart or caring people.
Oh, and my black brothers and sisters who are thinking about rushing to the polls because you think she's going to do something for us? Well, I'll just let Kamala tell you.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No.
Then there was that time she said she had a fundamental problem with investing more in education rather than the private prison system.
Build more schools, less jails. Build more schools, less jails. And we walk around everywhere. Build more schools. We protest. Build more schools, less jails.
And yes, she wants those protesters. Then the fact that this took place in Chicago really grinds my gears. The fact that this must have been a dark day in this city. Probably might explain a thunderstorm that happened. I don't know. Whenever now there's a tornado or a thunderstorm in Chicago, I'm wondering if there's a cringe Democrat politician doing stuff like this.
Put money into education, not prisons. There's a fundamental problem with that approach, in my opinion.
But I guess there is one positive takeaway we can get from this whole Kamala debacle. Kamala Harris is proof that anybody can start at the bottom to make their way to the top.
God damn. Hey, Nico. Hey, that wasn't family friendly. That wasn't family friendly at all. Shame on you. Hashtag canceled.
Anybody can start at the bottom to make their way to the top.
Travers Wolf says she's as Welsh as she is black. I don't know. I thought she was Indian. But she's going by pronouns. She, her. So isn't that great? We got our first pronoun interim president going by she, her. These pronouns, everything else. here's what's going to happen. In Chicago, I'm willing to bet there will be a contested convention. Because if you are a serious Democrat strategist, if you are a serious one, and off chance, let's say we got ourselves a diehard liberal who's hate watching, you have to look at the polling from 2019 and 2020, as well as the 3.5 years Kamala was vice president. Look at the internal polling. Look at the numbers. People were not impressed with Kamala. Kamala is an abysmal politician. She's not popular. She's not well liked. Just because she's a woman, just because she's a woman of color, does not automatically equal into what? Respectable, honest, hardworking leadership? No. She's a horribly flawed individual who really has no business in the highest office of the land. When given additional extra responsibilities, she only took them if they were tightly controlled and could fit her narrative. 42 of her staff members, she had 47, 42 upped and quit. Now, one could say, okay, well, wait a minute. Maybe she truly does have high standards. Or maybe she has ridiculous high standards. Maybe she's impossible to work with because she's really not fit for the job and is a complete narcissist, an egomaniac. Anybody can come up with their own conclusions, but if you hemorrhage staff members like that, 42 leave and only 5 remain. Folks, listen. Give a W in the chat for those that still have the stomach to deal with her. Or either that, I don't know. Maybe it's still an L. I don't know. Is for those 5 staff members still was Kamala. Is it a W or is it an L? Type 3 for W, a type 4 for an L. I think it could be an L because maybe they couldn't take the hint that Kamala is just this big epic fail, and they somehow think that if they stay on, they can present her as a respectable leader for the American people. There's going to be a contested convention. There's no way it can't be. Because as we get closer to the 19th of August, you want to know what the internet's going to do? No matter where they stand politically or what generation they are part of, the internet, all you beautiful, lovely people, are going to look into Kamala's past, her past decisions, her policy decisions, her previous statements. And it's going to be made very clear she's not fit for the job. And it goes right back to that first article, Biden privately doubting if Kamala has what it takes. Maybe this might be the first coherent thought that Biden has done in a long time. But Democrats, you're screwed. Grab the popcorn, folks. The convention's going to be hilarious.